I got up this morning and I started my day, God's mercy was with me all of the way. His goodness stayed close by to meet all my needs. My Lord is taking good care of me. I'm never forsaken, I'm never alone. One day I'm a-moving to my brand new home. I'm blessed beyond measure, just look close, you'll see. My Lord is taking good care of me. I'm counting my blessings as I journey along. Good friends, a family, and a place to call home. The church where I worship, the Bible I read. My Lord is taking good care of me. When Satan comes tempting and he brings up my past, I tell him I'm forgiven and it's buried at last. The bloodshed on Calvary now speaks for me. My Lord is taking good care of me. I'm never forsaken, I'm never alone. One day I'm a-moving to my brand new home. I'm blessed beyond measure, just look close, you'll see. My Lord is taking good care of me. I'm never forsaken, I'm never alone. One day I'm a-moving to my brand new home. I'm blessed beyond measure, just look close, you'll see. My Lord is taking good care of me. I'm blessed beyond measure, just look close, you'll see. My Lord is taking, He's always taking. My Lord is taking good care of me. What I was and I'm not what I'll be. You see, I've been born again. My life has been changed, completely rearranged since the day that Christ set me free. The old man I shed, I'm living, He's dead. I'm walking this heavenly way. I have no regrets, for nothing I've left. I'll stick with the old-fashioned way. I'm an old-fashioned, Bible-believing, born-again child of God. I'm a hell-fighting, devil-denier who's washed in the crimson flood. I'm singing and shouting, no longer doubting, just waiting on Jesus to come. I'm an old-fashioned, Bible-believing, born-again child of God. It's settled and decided, I'm not gonna hide it. I am not ashamed. The old King James Bible can still bring revival when the saints kneel down to pray. I believe Bible teaching and Holy Ghost preaching are the answer for this modern day. And old-timey worship, it's not gonna hurt us, we call it the old-fashioned way. I'm an old-fashioned, Bible-believing, born-again child of God. I'm a hell-fighting, devil-denier who's washed in the crimson flood. I'm singing and shouting, no longer doubting, just waiting on Jesus to come. I'm an old-fashioned, Bible-believing, born-again child of God. I'm an old-fashioned, Bible-believing, born-again child of God. I'm a hell-fighting, devil-denier who's a washed in the crimson flood. I'm singing and shouting, no longer doubting, just waiting on Jesus to come. I'm an old-fashioned, Bible-believing, born-again child of God. I'm an old-fashioned, Bible-believing, born-again child of God. I'm a born-again child of God. Here among the shadows in a lonely land, we're a band of pilgrims on the move, burdened down with sorrow, shunned on every hand. We're looking for a city built above, looking for a city where we'll never die. There the sainted millions never say goodbye. There we'll meet our Savior and our loved ones too. Come, O Holy Spirit, all our hopes renewed. Here in disappointment we so sadly roam, friends no longer speak one word of love. We have found contentment, Jesus promised us a home. We're looking for a city built above, looking for a city where we'll never die. There the sainted millions never say goodbye. There we'll meet our Savior and our loved ones too. Come, O Holy Spirit, all our hopes renewed. In this land of danger, we're going here and there, trusting in the blessed Savior's love. Though we may be strangers living in this world of care, we're looking for a city built above, looking for a city where we'll never die. There the sainted millions never say goodbye. There we'll meet our Savior and our loved ones too. Come, O Holy Spirit, all our hopes renewed. Looking for a city where we'll never die. There the sainted millions never say goodbye. There we'll meet our Savior and our loved ones too. Come, O Holy Spirit, all our hopes renewed. Looking for a city where we'll never die. There the sainted millions never say goodbye. There we'll meet our Savior and our loved ones too. Come, O Holy Spirit, all our hopes renewed.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday School. Good to have everybody here, and Welcome, Brother Mark Byers, our missionary to Germany. And we'll start off, as you always do, with any prayer requests.
Stacy's still recovering from surgery. Something this morning. He's going to try to come today. He was up down all night. Still hurt real bad.
Yeah.
Just continue to remember him. They said it could be 4 to 6 weeks before he really started to see improvement and all that. So just continue to remember him in prayer.
It's good to see Brother Jerry with us. How are you doing, Jerry?
Good.
That's good. Anyone else? Okay. Okay. What's anybody know the status on Ben's dad?
Still trying to figure things out.
Okay. And likewise, also pray for Lachelle. She had that wisdom teeth surgery a while back. I'm not sure how she's doing. I actually don't understand. She's sore. Also, we remember to pray for our nation. Anyone else? Well, I appreciate your prayers. I had that surgery a little over a week ago. I appreciate your prayers and your continued prayers too. I'm not really out of the woods yet. So, anyway, Brother Caleb, can you open us up in prayer, please?
Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for allowing us to be in your house one more time. We thank you for allowing us to get here safely. I pray you please touch and bless each and every request. Brother Stacy, Miss Lachelle, Brother Brent, Ben's dad, all these unspoken requests. God, we pray you please touch and help and bless each and every one of their lives. You know the needs of each and every one of our hearts, the ones that was not spoken, even that's in our hearts this morning. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. This morning, open your Bibles, please, to Nehemiah chapter 2. Nehemiah chapter 2, we'll read verses 17 and 18. Nehemiah chapter 2, beginning in verse 17. Then said I unto them, Ye see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lieth waste, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come, and let us build up the wall of Jerusalem, that we be no more a reproach. Then I told them of the hand of my God, which was good upon me, as also the king's words that he had spoken unto me. And they said, Let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for this good work. Nehemiah had a vision and shared it with the enthusiasm. This inspired Jerusalem's leaders to rebuild the wall. Often God uses one person to express the vision and others to turn it into reality. When you encourage others, you put teamwork into action to accomplish God's goals. And with that, you're dismissed to your classes.
Can anybody tell me what book of the Bible we're on? Song of Solomon. I wished you would have said something else. Let me ask you a question just to open up with while I'm getting to where I need to be. As we're going through these books and a short survey of the Old Testament, kind of going through this, and you come to the Song of Solomon. How many's ever read and studied the Song of Solomon? How many's not studied it? Well, I wished you had studied it. I've read it too also, but now I studied it, and I'm as lost as a golf ball is in high weeds. There's so many things here out of the Song of Solomon. It is a very complicated book, but it's a very good book. Learned a great deal. I learned a great deal in the Song of Solomon. But anybody has any opening comments on the Song of Solomon? Would there like that you would share after you've read the Song of Solomon and you've studied the Song of Solomon? What would you like to share with us? That's what I thought. Who's the author of Song of Solomon? Solomon. And, some of the titles, I've heard people call it this, we're going to be preaching from the book of Song of Songs. And that's another title that people use for the Song of Solomon. But it's all there. So we've established who the author was in this particular book. And there's a lot of reasons out of this book that he is the author as you read it and you find out. In the Old Testament states that, in 1 Kings 4:32, that Solomon composed 1,005 songs. 1,005 songs. So would you say that Solomon could and did write a lot of the songs that's out of this particular book? So as we look at this, it's a song. There's poetry. And when you look at those two types of things and you start thinking about it, I don't know if you remember, some of you probably don't, some of you are new. Some time back, I brought a portrait in. I don't know if you remember that. I brought a portrait of my stepdaughter and my daughter. I brought that, set it up there, and I asked you all, I said, what do you see in the picture? If you ever go to an art museum or you take, art appreciation in college, the first thing you're going to learn to do is look at a painting, and then you are to tell what you see out of that painting. What is there? What is that called? That's called allegory. One of the things in the Song of Solomon people do is they read it and say it is an allegory. That's one of the things that they talk about. What is an allegory? Well, it's just like this. You see a song, you see a picture, and you describe what is in there. What is it about? You take the Wizard of Oz, for example. The Wizard of Oz. The writer and what they came out from saying about the way that picture portrays, I don't see it. I don't understand it. But anyway, they say that it is a governmental issue back during the Depression time. When did the movie come out? 1939. That's when the movie came out. And it all had to deal with the government during the Depression. Is what it was all about. And each thing represented something. The ruby red slippers, the yellow brick road represented gold and all this other stuff. So there is, you see the story, but you don't see anything have to deal with that. Correct? Well, the painting that I brought in was with my daughter and my stepdaughter. And in the painting, those two was there together, kind of meek and mild and innocent. That's the picture that it shows. And then you've got all the adults around them. And then there's a gesture in the corner. So for years, I had that painting, and I asked him, my brother Bryant, to paint me a portrait of those two. And I was looking for the two girls just in a portrait in the background, whatever. No. He painted that portrait just like that. And I had no clue. So I asked him one day, I said, Bryant, you've got to tell me, what does that represent? And Bryant says, well, whatever you want it to be. Whatever you want it to be. I said, I don't know what I want it to be. I don't see anything in there. I see adults, I see children, and I see a clown over here on the corner. What is all that about? And then he had the same painting in the background like a framed picture. And he says, you don't get it. And I says, no, I don't get it. So I need you to explain it to me. So he did. And what he explained to me was this. When children come into the world, and as children growing up, you see a lot of innocence. They tell the truth until the world influences them not to tell the truth. You got the world influences children in worldly ways. And I said, and you got all that? He says, oh yeah. And then he went on and elaborated longer and longer and longer about the painting and what he was doing. And I said, well, why over here it's kind of light and over here it's dark? He said, realistically, in your mind, you have a dark side and you have a light side. The dark side represents evil. The light side represents goodness. And the more I thought about that and the painting, I said, man, you know, I understand now why I did not do very well in art appreciation. So, and you go through it, and as I was studying the Song of Solomon, one of the theories that people take when they read the book of Song of Solomon is that it is an allegory story. It's you know, and so this is one of the different things, and what it takes is the view popular in early Jewish literature. From these writings in these 8 chapters, what they're taking from the Jewish literature completely denies the literal aspect. They say it is not literal. Now, who wrote this? I know Solomon is the author, but who influenced Solomon to write this? God. Is this not the Word of God? This is the Word of God. Don't forget that. And it can lead you away if you start reading commentaries about the Song of Solomon. It is a literal love story. There is a courtship period. There is an engagement period. And there is a marriage. And then there's a honeymoon period. And it's all in there. There is a shepherd in this story. That's literal. There is a Solomon's in this story. And then there is a Shulamite woman in this story, the bride. So you can take it as that way, because in the Jewish literature completely denies the literal aspect. The book is treated solely as the allegory. For example, Solomon is said to represent the Lord and the maiden to represent Israel. So could you read it and could you take it from that? Yes. Yes, you could. If you took it that way. What is the picture? You know, what is the painting? What do you see in that painting? And you could take it that way. Now, if I brought the painting in here, now I know there's people in here, they could probably look at that and say, well, I don't get anything like that. This is what I get. And that's what an allegory can do. Is that wrong? According to the Jews, that's what they believe. So that's one of the things. Also, it could be a typological. There's a lot, there's a lot of types. There's a lot of pictures in the Bible. Jesus used a lot of that. God used a lot of that. Types. Okay? And you take a story, or you take a parable, and it could be a picture and it could be a type. So another theory, or another way that you could look at this, is the early church admitted the literal courtship and marriage, but interpreted these only to be a type. Church admitted to the courtship and marriage. So it could be the type of Christ and the church. Now, when you get into that and you go to the book of Revelation, who's going to be coming for the bride? Who's coming for the bride? In the book of Revelation, in chapter 22. Christ. He's coming for his bride. That's a type. That's when I refer to the type. Could you take that out of the Song of Solomon? Well, there's a shepherd, and then there's Solomon. Is Solomon the shepherd? When was the book written? So you got to look at the when was this book written? Because I told you last week, or in Ecclesiastes, that Solomon had how many wives? Did I say? I said 300. I was wrong. I am so sorry. He had 700. And he had 300 concubines. So 1,000. So he understood a lot about women.
Or maybe he didn't, and it just took him a long time.
Well, he was looking for that right personality. So,
That's why all the men wanna say it's an allegory, because they can't think about having 700 mother-in-laws.
well, I wasn't going to get into that. But since you brought that up, you're talking about 700 different personalities and so forth. But anyway, so I don't think that it's an allegory. I mean, I just don't think that is. We're going to take this view as it being literal. That's what I'm going to look at this at this book, the literal love story. The literal love story. Is it a triangle love story? Is it where there's the shepherd, Solomon, and the Shulamite, woman? And we start out before I get there, let me finish this up right here, my introduction. And this view sees the book as highly poetic description of an actual love relationship. If God is in this, now, is God mentioned in this book, Song of Solomon? Now, you read it. Is God's name mentioned in this book? The answer is no. There's another book in the Old Testament that God is not mentioned, but he's all over it, Esther. But he's all in that book. I truly believe that God is in this book because he's telling, how. There is an application here. There's an application on how to select a mate. There's an application in here how you should treat your wife. There is an application to all that in here. So, and God wrote this story through Solomon and the Shulamite maiden. In favor of this view, that it takes the book at face value and places it with a parallel Egyptian love song of the era. Therefore, the interpretation is followed in a lot of ways. The purpose of the book is to show the joy of marriage, love as a gift from God. As a gift. So when was it written? Based on that, based on what I just said, it had to happen in Solomon's earlier years. Could it have been? This is the first of his wives, the first one, the Shulamite woman. Could it have been? Yes, it could have been. It could have been. So as the story goes, the book is a love song sung by two lovers, the shepherd king and the Shulamite maiden. Does anywhere in history does it mention that Solomon was a shepherd? Who was a shepherd that Solomon? David was a shepherd. So in that lineage, Solomon knew about shepherds. I'm not saying that he was not a shepherd. It doesn't say in the Bible that he was, and it doesn't say that he wasn't. But I guarantee you this, he understood about being a shepherd and what the duties were of a shepherd. And you can see a little bit of that in this reading. So, Solomon appears first as a young shepherd who falls in love with the outcast Shulamite girl. Now, you can disagree with that statement if you want to. Thank you. I'm glad you didn't. All right. And in chapter 1, you start out and you've got this Shulamite woman, and it doesn't mention her name here. It doesn't mention her name until chapter 6 and where she's from. But this lady is dreaming, and and it's Song of Songs, which is Solomon, and she's dreaming this dream from verse 1 through verse 7. And one of the things that you look at that, and it says, and I don't understand a whole lot about this, but there's a lot here, and it talks about herself. And in verse 5 it says, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar and as the curtains of Solomon. Now, when you talk about the tents, and it talks about black, and she's as black as the tents. What is that? What are we talking about? And when I read that, I thought, man, and if you dig, you'll find the answer. But what they did with those tents, they sewed those tents up with goat hair and black goat hair. So these tents were made black from the goat hair. And she says that she's as black as that. So, first of all, you think, what's going on? Then she explains why. Because she's keeping the vineyards. She's out in the vineyards all the time. And, I go fishing. In the wintertime, I'm not as dark as I am now. I mean, and if I fish and so forth, and I have to be very careful at my age because I've got a dark spot right here. And that could lead to cancer. So I try to cover up as much as I possibly can. Of course it gets hot and so on and so on. We won't go into that. And it says in verse 6, look not upon me because I am black, because the sun hath what? Looked upon me. My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards. So evidently, she's a stepchild. I mean, I'm just going to throw that in there. All right? So Solomon is not even spoke yet. And as you look at this, and you look at in verse 7, it says, the maiden now addresses her shepherd lover to determine his location. Verse 7, tell me, O thou whom my soul loveth, where thou feedest, where thou makest thy flock to rest at noon. For why should I be as one that turneth aside by the flocks thy companions? Now, you start in verse 8, and I'm not going to read verse by verse. I just wanted to get you to understand where we're at and what is occurring. So apparently this Shulamite woman is in love with what? A shepherd. Would you agree with that? And then all of a sudden in chapter 8 verse 8 and verse 9, Solomon begins to speak. And look at verse 9. Song of Solomon, verse 9, chapter 1. I have compared thee, O my love, to a company of horses in Pharaoh's chariots. Now that's Solomon's first word for the shepherd Solomon, shepherd king. Now, you can interpret this as there is a shepherd and then there's Solomon, and it's not one. I mean, you could, and probably, I don't know. I'm just telling you what I get from this. So the point that I want you to look at in verse 9 is when you walk up to someone and you kind of are attracted to one and another. And I would tell you what Brenda and I, on the first time that we went out, but it would be too embarrassing. We were going to meet. You tell her this. You tell her this, but anyway. So here's what happened. We were going to meet somewhere, then we were going to go to Oneida and we was going to eat at one of those restaurants up there. I can't even think the name of it now. Don't tell her I forgot the name of the restaurant either. Preston's, thank you. That's where we were going to go eat. So I'm pulled into this place where we're supposed to meet. She's coming down the road, and so I'm going to get out of the truck, and as she did, she passed me up and went on. She made the loop, she come back around. Then she pulled off to the side. And I said, what happened? Did you forget where you was going? And she said, no, there was a couple of people behind me, and I didn't want them to see that me and you were going out together. So I have compared thee, O my love, to a company of horses. So Solomon compares her to a company of horses. I don't know if it's Mr. Ed or who, but now all of a sudden he's compared them to a company of horses. Why? Well, I did some research on that too. Solomon, back in those days, very proud of the horses that he had in his corral. I mean, the horses. So to him, that's beautiful. That was beautiful. So he was comparing her to the horses that he had, how beautiful she was. And then he goes in, and it's very, thy cheeks are comely with rows of jewels, thy neck with chains of gold. So as you read through this, he is talking to his soon-to-be bride. Now, chapter 2, you're talking about the bride's admiration. And in chapter 2, the maiden modestly compares herself to the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys, meaning that in her view, she is only a common field flower. So I look at that, and he has a high status. She is just a common field worker in a vineyard. So she's comparing herself to just a simple flower. So then it says, Solomon replies that the maiden compared to other women is like a lily among thorns. So he comes back with that, saying she is compared to a lily among other women that are thorns. So that's why I take that, because if I had 700 wives at that point and I compared them to a thorn, I believe I would say that probably something bad would happen. So that's the reason I look at that, and it leads me to believe that this had to happen early in his life. So Ecclesiastes was written after the Song of Solomon, in my opinion, based on that. So now I'm supposed to teach you this book, okay? That's the purpose of this. I'm to give you a survey, an outline of what this book is about. So when you go back and read it, you may be like the picture here. Oh, yeah, I get this now, hopefully. That's not going to happen. But anyway, I can think it might. But anyway, the maiden returns the compliment by comparing Solomon to a cultivated apple tree, which stands out among all other trees. Opening statements. Like I said, this is a song. This is poetry in motion, I guess. So he's compared to an apple among all the trees, a bright red apple, a red delicious apple, or a golden delicious. I don't know which one, but anyway. Yeah. Yeah. So as they go through this, and what we're looking at there, we're looking at, what you call the courtship, during the courtship time. That's what we're looking at. And so now in verse 3, it's the bride's troubled dream. The bride's troubled dream. This passage seems clear to be a dream, since it is unlikely that a modest maiden would have gone out in this way at night. It expresses the maiden's fear that she could see her beloved during his absence. Now, the way that I take this is during his absence. So the shepherd has gone off the scene in chapter 3. And you could get into a lot of things there as well. So as you read chapter 3, there's a couple of things in here, like verses 6 through 11. The passage describes the marriage process, with Solomon arrayed in all his glory and splendor. Pillars of smoke means columns of incense. So when you read that in here and it talks about pillars of smoke, it's talking about incense. And it's 60 valiant men were Solomon's bodyguard. The bed was the carriage. This is what she's dreaming. Does that make sense? And the crown was not a royal crown, but a wedding crown given to him by Bathsheba, his mother. So they've got to know each other at this point in time. And I think they lil him fove. as Render Seller would say. Because she slopped her dripper, because she found her praying some hens. But anyway, y'all will catch all that sometime or another. This guy right here, Mark, he's up here going, man, this guy's crazy. But anyway, I enjoy. But anyway, as we look at this, and in verse 4, we're looking at the bridegroom praises the bride. The bridegroom praises the bride. Is that not what happens in a relationship? Chapter 4, yeah. What did I say, verse 4? Excuse me, chapter 4. We're moving through this, like I said. So you're getting a picture. You're getting a picture. The best that I can paint for you at this time. You're getting a picture. See, this is more, the literal aspect is actually a courtship time, just like we talked about. So it's kind of like, I get to know you, we lil and fub, and so we're going through this process. This is the process that God wants you to go through when you find a mate. And the bridegroom praises the bride. The bridegroom. Who's the bridegroom? Solomon here. That's good. But do y'all, right. Right. So anyway, behold, thou art fair, my love. Behold, thou art fair. Thou hast dove's eyes. I had to look that up. What are we referring to as dove's eyes? Beautiful eyes. And that's a great interpretation of that. But also, a dove, they mate for life. Mate for life. Geese mate for life. They mate for life. So when you mate for life and she's found her mate, she's focused on one person. Or you see what I'm saying? And doves, when they're out, they're focused on one thing. Geese, there's a whole story behind a flock of geese. And you could go into a typology just by the flock of geese. If a goose falls out, the mate will fall out too and protect her mate until they get better. So you're using a lot of things here. Flock of, within, and then hast dove eyes. Within thy locks thy hair is a flock of goats. So what color is her hair? Someone say black. Thank you. All right, now. So that appears from Mount Gilead. Okay, and she goes through this, and it's using, teeth, lips, neck, and so on to describe. I mean, it's just how he sees her. And he's expressing that. He's expressing his love toward her. So, then starting in verse 9 it says, in verse 9, thou hast ravished my heart, my sister, my spouse. Thou hast ravished my heart with one of thine eyes, with one chain of thy neck. I take it as this right here. The whole family. The whole family. You after a while, sometime or another, you're going to take your mate and you're going to meet the family. You're going to meet the family. And sometimes so anyway, and so you're looking at of that process as well. Solomon describes the maiden with the imagery of a locked garden in where there are all kinds of choices, fruits, and pleasures. So within that particular chapter, that's what you're getting. You're getting the bridegroom praises the bride. And then the chapter 5, the maiden considers. And it continues. In chapter 5, you're getting the same thing. You're getting the marriage, and that's going to be coming to. Then, starting in verse 9 of chapter 5, the bride praises the bridegroom. Starting in chapter 9. So this is going back and forth. You know, I thought about one at this point in time, but I'll ask the question anyway. Do you all see, you know, in your relationship that you have with your wife, do you see some of this going on as well? As you talked, maybe not as much in poetry, but getting to know each other and how you understand what I'm asking? Because it's in my notes down here to ask that particular question. So I did. So we'll move on. All right. So the bride praises the bridegroom in verse 9. And Solomon speaks again and reiterates his love and appreciation for his wife. The depreciation is much the same as in 4:1 through 7. Her uniqueness among all of Solomon's women. So we get to that particular point. How many women did he have at this time? Like I say, this could have been the first, or this could have been, now he's gotten more women in his concubine. I don't have a clue. But as you look at that, you have to take that into the consideration of all this. The uniqueness among all of Solomon's women, especially stressed in verses 8 and 9. So as I'm reading this, and the way that I'm studying this is moving along pretty rapidly. Would you agree? And Tabitha over there, the whole time I'm going through this, all she's been doing is looking at Dennis and laughing. They're getting a big kick out of this.
Brendan and I are over here going, what courtship?
There you go. All right. Love at first sight, you know.
No,
Boom.
no love at first sight.
No love at first sight. So y'all had to get to know each other for a long, lengthy time.
We married and then got to know each other.
Okay. That works for you all.
Thank you, Lord.
But anyway. So, as we move on. In chapter 7, the two speeches in this section, chapter 7, 7:1 through 8:4. 7:1 through 8:4. This is what it is. The two speeches in this section, one by each partner, speak of the growing maturity and depth of their marriage. What it's indicating here is this. Once the marriage has occurred, it's no turning back now. No turning back now. And the more and more you get to meet Brother Evan back there, and they're grinning from ear to ear. But this is a fun book to teach, I guarantee you. And I had no clue how this would turn out. But anyway, as the marriage goes, you grow. As the marriage grows, you grow. I know those two back there are talking about, well, do you remember the time when we got in that big argument? I can see it back there. Y'all behave. You two behave. Evan, you behave back there. You and Courtney need to calm down now. To Solomon, the maiden satisfies like food and drink. I mean, and you look in verse 2, it says, and you get into this, you get into this, and it's very graphic of exactly what has occurred on the honeymoon night. And it's all in here. And I'm not going to read that because my face would get very red. So, but it's God's word. That's the reason I say God is all in this. Because this is the way it's supposed to be done. This is the way God intended marriage to occur. You know, you think you know your wife until you wake up the next morning and we're all in hair rollers and no, I'm just teasing. But you think
We had a Sunday school teacher, and you know what he said? He said it's like an egg, And it's so pretty on the outside, when you get married and you crack it open, it might not be so good.
Well, that's pretty good. That's a good way to put it. But you get through it, right? But you get through it. Well, you know, I could got up here and did a demonstration like Brother Dustin did with flour and milk and all that stuff, and you know, the egg and everything. Now, you know, when you're in college, you do crazy things. You do crazy things. And I was crazy. I was crazy. A guy said, I bet you $100 that you would not eat a raw egg and hamburger. Now, why he wanted to go through that right there, because we were talking about food, and you know, I like a steak rare. I like a steak rare. He says, I can't stand that. He says, I got to have it well done. I said, so you like shoe leather? So we were talking. From that conversation, he says, I'll give you $100 if you'll eat a raw egg and raw hamburger. Well, I was going to college, and $100 would be like $10,000 today. I went to college at Tennessee Tech for 20 years. No, I went to college, and for a quarter, not a semester, for a quarter, it cost me, for my classes and books and everything, it cost me $120. That's all. I graduated from Tennessee Tech, and I went to college, and my parents paid for every dime of that except for my master's, and I had to pay for that. It cost me a grand total of $7,000. So back in those days, you can see the difference today. Now, go to college for $7,000, that'd get you in the door and right out the back door. So that's what I'm trying to say. But for $100, I could do that. So he went and got me some hamburger. And thank goodness it was ground chuck. And he put that in there, and he created a little indention in there, and he cracked an egg and put it on there. He says, now eat that. And I said, if I eat that, you're going to give me $100. He said, yes. I said, lay the $100 on the table. And he did. And I eat that. And I got the $100. Did I throw up afterwards? No. No, I didn't. And now that sounds bad to y'all, but hey, there's a whole lot worse college pranks than that. There was a whole lot worse than that. But I ate that. And I can eat raw hamburger.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Well, okay. Well, that's good. So, I don't know how that did that. I love technology, don't you? This thing's not even turned on. So, the reason that they didn't understand is that person never went to college. All right, now. Verse 7 of first, I've lost where I was at. All right. So Solomon ate the hamburger and she ate the raw egg, and they were united in marriage. All right, now, to the maiden, the marriage is so satisfying that she feels completely freedom to be with her husband. In other words, they're getting to know each other more and more and greater and so on. Mandrakes. It talks about a mandrake in here. It talks about mandrakes in 7:13. And thou that dwellest in the gardens, the companions hearken to thy voice, cause me to hear it. Make haste, my beloved, and thou like to a roe or to a young hart upon the mountains of spices. Again, in looking through a lot of these things, and in this particular chapter, the verses are clearly of 6 and 7, 14. It's kind of like the climax to the whole story. The climax to the whole story. And chapter 8, you get more into, how the story really goes and finishes up. And these, 8 through 12, these are difficult, but they seem to go back historically to explain how the love described in verses 5 and 7 came into being. It seems that the brothers of the maiden are the speakers in verses 8 and 9. 8 and 9. They are mentioned in verse 1:6. They recall when she was their little sister and lived under their protective eye, they determined that if she were a wall, they would honor her. If she were a door, they would curtail their liberty. So you get into this stuff, and I mean this is deep stuff. But anyway, as you look at this, and as we've went through this, and as a summary, and I know I've stammered through it, and I went through different phases of it, but when you look at this, is there a typology here? Could you use this a type? Go with me to Revelation 22. And we're going to look at verse 12 to start with. And I think you all know where I'm going with this. Is there a type? Starting in verse 12. And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work shall be. And verse 16. I, Jesus, have sent mine angels to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David, and the bright and morning star. Verse 7, going backwards. Behold, I come quickly. Blessed is he that keepeth the sayings of the prophecy of this book. Verse 20. He which testifieth these things saith, surely I come quickly. Amen. Even so come Lord Jesus. One day he's coming back. He's coming back for his bride. The bride is the church. The bridegroom is Jesus. And then you know the rest of the story. There is going to be a great feast, a marriage feast. That's going to occur. So in the Song of Solomon, there is a typology. And I think it represents, and you can see that through that book of Solomon, because God wrote the book through Solomon. And he's wanting you to see that in a marriage, the marriage supper of the Lamb, you know that that's going to occur. We know the end of the book. Solomon didn't. We know what's going to occur. The rapture is going to occur. And he's going to be, and we're going to be, the church is going to be with the bridegroom. So, with that said, anybody have any questions, any comments? And I don't care if she didn't understand it at all. But you know, if you get into and you study this and you read this, I guarantee you'll probably come out with a whole lot more than what I give you. A lot more meaning. And there's only one way that you can really get into the Song of Solomon, and thank goodness I'm through it. Because I mean, there's just so many different directions you can go in, and you start reading commentaries on it, and no one is set in stone on certain issues in it. There's not. And the brother here, I guarantee you, if he got up here and taught it, he'd do a whole lot better than I could do. But like I say, you've got to take it as a literal book. There is some pictures and there's some typology in it, but you have to take it as a literal marriage. That's how you have to take it. Well, I appreciate your attention. Anybody have any comments? Tabitha, would you like to have a comment? She's not going to say a word. She's already in trouble, right, Dennis? Okay. I appreciate your attention. Thank you.